I'm available, I'm happy to be here.
Okay.
Here in good hands.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Then we can, yes, we can have a 5-minute recess. And we'll come back, and our first interview will be at 5:30.
Chief Boyne is here, by the way, he's sitting in the mahogany.
Okay, great.
I'm gonna run out to my car up right there.
Okay.
And I'm gonna keep.
No.
Either, the table might still be a little wet, I just wiped it down, to assure that we are sanitizing properly. So welcome. Shawn, nice to meet you in person.
Thanks for having me.
I know that you had called in on Monday, so you're familiar with some of our voices, but I'd like to go ahead and just have us introduce ourselves, if that's okay. My name is Christine Hoyt. I am the chair of the Board of Selectmen, and I will go this way.
Hi, I'm Jim Bush, Vice Chair.
Rick Blanchard. Sheldon O'Leary.
And John Paul.
And you met Jay upon your entrance. So great. So we're happy that you're able to join us this evening in person. We have a series of questions that we're going to ask each of the candidates, and we hope to get through our questions to allow some time at the end for you to ask us questions. That bottle of water is for you if you feel like you need some water. So that we'll just dive right in if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. So, Shawn, you've had a chance to review and respond to the job posting and also see the job description. Can you just generally talk to us about your professional experiences and your skills, and talk to us about how those will line up with the duties and responsibilities of the police chief for the town of Adams, and what specifically makes you the right fit for our community?
I realize my cover letter and resume is a little long-winded, so I'm gonna try not to regurgitate everything, but most relative, I think, is my past 8 years of experience as a police chief for the town of New Milford. We have a population of 28,000, somewhat underestimated, it's approximately 30, you get to 35 in the summer. It's demographically very consistent with the makeup of Adams. It's essentially the second part of my career, so to speak. But during that period, I entered into the position in a very similar process. We're having air interviews and testing, et cetera. And I faced immediate challenges of restructuring the agency. We had an exodus of the command staff, and several senior officers as a result of some benefit changes that were upcoming in the town benefit package. I immediately looked at a SWOT assessment, looking at the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats of the agency, and looking at the skill set of the remaining command staff. It was my goal to build upon that internally, giving obviously morale a boost, giving opportunity for internal candidates to be essential future leaders of the agency. It was readily identifiable to me. One of the candidates was really highly skilled, had an extraordinary background, and I made some of my promotions immediately from within the restructuring command staff. I looked at issues such as diversity. Where are we consistent with the demographic makeup of the community? And we were short on some things, so our recruitment was focused on a broader scale to meet some of the statistics related to the demographics of the community. The benefits of that for me were it increases the connectivity with the population. There's a lot of information and cultural, I'm going to say, concerns that go with this, and bringing candidates with those cultural backgrounds to the police department educates everybody, raises awareness, and also provides us better service. So those were some of the things. That was some of the reasons that I saw some connection with that. Also, moving forward, we're facing a lot of infrastructure issues. Some of the challenges were complete failure of the communication system, complete, I'm going to say, breakdown, or the fleet was dilapidated. It wasn't even, it was a makeup of mishmash, different vehicles. We had looking at it, the officers were at significant risk because these weren't OSHA-approved pursuit vehicles and the like. So I brought some of that to the table, through some innovative financing, initiatives. We were able to revamp the fleet, bring it consistent, officer wellness and safety was a key component in some of the, things we looked at. Moving forward into that, we had, I think on my third weekend, the radio communication console caught fire. There was complete communications. Looking at the radio system, it was something that I had experienced equipment-wise back in the late 80s when I was with the state police. So we looked at some immediate homeland security and grant funding. We received a grant right off the bat, almost $200,000. Got the ball rolling, completely redesigned and structured a communication system working with Northeast Communications. And that was an exposure to see how, constellation studies, site development, tower locations, acquisition of properties by the municipality and private property, working with the community. And we're able to put together a $4.3 million communication system, state-of-the-art, tower locations, 5 of them exactly, multicast, simulcast with a microwave transmission. And it was state-of-the-art, obviously, and it increased the safety of every officer. We incorporated the fire department, the ambulance, and public works into the communication system. So we had a united and a cooperative, collective communication system. State-of-the-art, again, we had forecast the use of it for 10 years, we looked at a 30-year service availability of it, and that was completed 16 months ahead of schedule and $158,000 for the budget. Some of the other achievements was our community interaction initiatives. I believe in officers on foot. I believe in bike patrols. I believe in regular contact with the community residents. By doing so, some of our staffing limitations didn't afford us the opportunity to have a constant foot beat officer, but also knowing that in a community with 64.5 square miles, the guy walking foot is not going to get to the calls sometimes. So we did some initiatives where a combination of both officers required to enter their vehicle, community interaction, record and document, community contact forms, things like that. And the bike patrol is certainly a huge, connection with the town. We got the church groups. I focused on the community activists. Some of our, the community groups, Rotary, Knights of Columbus, Lions Club, regularly meeting with them, and they were voices of the community. We could hear some of the needs, some of the desires, some of what's going on with the police department. We exercise a lot of our connectivity with the community through Facebook, social media. And those were some of the things that weren't in place at the time when I got there, and it's something we developed into. And part of all that, certainly we learned and really started to capitalize on public trust. We built that, we focused on that. It was all about service, all about community interaction, all about building trust and confidence in the police department. I wanted it to be really essentially some of the results that were later availed in the 21st Century Policing Report. But the public had trust in us to do what we were doing, that what we were doing was legitimate. So those are some of the important things that I feel that were, that have given me kind of in a position to feel confident to succeed in this position. Also, as we're, I negotiated 3 collective bargaining agreements with the patrol officers, 3 collective bargaining agreements with our communications dispatchers, of which we had to address some significant financial issues within town, to look at some of the benefit packages, not just have the standard insurance availability. We had to prepare and introduce some hybrid benefit packages. Recruitment and retention was drastically affected by the pay scale. It was just extremely low. So working with the information available to me through the Connecticut Council of Municipalities, I did a wage comparison study, and I was able to, working with the town council and the Board of Finance, look at some financial initiatives to make it more interesting to be an employee of the town of New Milford. So instead of spending $100,000 per officer through the academy, we'll get some wage initiatives and that in turn retained them, so we were losing young officers to better managed departments. We looked at restructuring the schedule. The work schedule was a 5-2. These officers were working 25 years, Tuesday, Wednesday off. Not the best for family life, and certainly we had an unusual high rate of absenteeism. By introducing that flex schedule of 5-3, 5 days on, 3 days off, they incorporated weekends and time off, our sick leave use, and other leave costs, overtime, et cetera, decreased enormously. So looking at that, those were, again, some things to make employment better. Other things were school safety initiatives. They were not available, so we introduced some active aggressive shooting response training, quite a bit actually. It wasn't just the conventional, police are here, this is what we're going to do. I felt it important to utilize the skill set of the faculty and staff, because they know the complete layout of school, they know every nook, every cranny. All our training incorporated not only the ambulance service, or the fire service, but also incorporated the faculty and staff. They played a major role between the evacuation, sheltering in place, and not just solely evacuating school to a singular off-site secure location. We established multiple, so in case of threat, continued outside. And also, from my experience, reunification was huge. You know, everybody else, plans to exit the school, no one plans to get back in, no one ever plans to reunite the families when the parents show up, and I call it the minivan brigade, because the taxi goes out, the minivans come in. So that was some important initiatives. Additionally, we focused again on the development of personnel through training opportunities, and training is, as we all know, one of the major costs in police department operations. And the remote area, I'm going to say the distant location of New Milford to the training academy, I was spending 2 to 3, sometimes 4 hours of overtime, just travel time for the officers. So, working regionally with some of the various police departments in the immediate area, meeting with chiefs, we selected individuals for specific training opportunities. We trained the trainer, and we were holding our training locally, and that immediately cut back huge costs of overtime related to training. And at that point in time, now we could expand training opportunities to a broader part of the department. Additionally, emergency response, tactical teams, dive teams, accident reconstruction teams, we work regionally using other police department resources and focusing, again, collectively on our own, but again, cost-saving initiatives. So, as chief, I presented 8 $5 million plus budgets. I never once had to request supplementary appropriation for funding. We often were able to return significant funds back to the community unexpended. My capital expenditures were kept at a minimum. They were a need list, not a want list. And yet we were able to bring in equipment such as motor vehicle or recorders and the video recording equipment into the cruisers for officer safety issues, evidence value collection, and the like. So those are some of the important things. We worked very aggressively with the State Asset Forfeiture Unit and working with narcotics investigation, seizure of monies, properties, and we were in turn received over the years hundreds of thousands of dollars of state asset forfeiture monies. That's solely based on my previous experience with the state police, working in the narcotics task force and working exclusively with the asset forfeiture unit at the state's attorney's office. So I kind of have a good experience in the inner workings of that. That process is very similar nationally, because it's controlled by the federal government. So to bring that skill set to Adams would be an easy fit. Additionally, we looked at restructuring some operational issues in the agency. That being the sectors of control were not efficiently laid out. We restructured those. We restructured some of our response protocols, so it just wasn't a free cruiser responding to the call with the closest call principle. That was all available through the electronic mapping of the GPS system. Beyond that, again, I think what prepared me for all this was my 24 years with Penn State Police. It was a great opportunity to work throughout the state. I had experience pretty much all 169 pounds. I investigated everything from mailbox damage to homicide. Had great exposure, great training opportunity. I started off as a patrol trooper in the northwest corner. Majority of my law enforcement experience has been in rural community policing. I did a 5-year tour down in New Hartford, where I served as a resident trooper. And that essentially chief of police for a small department in a 9-man crew, 7-man, 2 part-time. I was responsible for overall supervision of the operations of the department, purchasing vehicles, and it really was my first, hands-on experience to law enforcement administration as chief of police. I was promoted to the rank of sergeant in 1996. I was immediately assigned to the Connecticut State Police Statewide Narcotics Task Force. And our primary responsibility was to assist municipalities in narcotics investigations from street level all the way up to major international trafficking. I was predominantly involved in investigations regarding involving wiretaps, electronic oil and wire intercepts, working with state courts and preparing affidavits, overseeing the operations, and asset forfeiture, seizures of property, vehicles, monies, and again, seizing houses, cars, boats, and property internationally, working with the FBI, DEA, et cetera. So that was a great experience. I returned back to the troop, working patrol operations. I was promoted in 2004 to the rank of Master Sergeant, which I was assigned to Troop B North Canaan as the executive officer. My lieutenant went out on leave almost immediately. Thanks, Pete. And I wound up as the commanding officer, acting for my 2 years at the Canaan Barracks, again, overseeing a patrol of 54 troopers, about a $6 million budget, 70-some-odd vehicles, in 2 municipal police departments, and resident troopers and officers. So that was my introduction into command, so to speak. I was promoted in 2006 to the rank of lieutenant. I was immediately assigned to the professional standards unit. And right away, we started and dove into the internal affairs investigations regarding misconduct of officers, or troopers in the agency. It was kind of amazing. I didn't really think how crazy things could be, people could actually do, but it is. Most of my investigations were centered around misconduct related to domestic violence, sexual assault, department policy violations. Had a lot of exposure to the legal affairs division of the agency, as well as the state labor department, pursuant to obviously testing disciplines and things like that, and testifying, preparing briefs for our presentation. That was a great opportunity. It really gave me a lot of background in employee discipline and oversight and policy. In 2007, I returned to the troop as commanding officer, Troop L. We had 130 officers under my command, 94 troopers, and 57 municipal officers for resident troopers towns. That was an extraordinary responsibility because I also worked as essentially executive officer for the district commander and major. So we oversaw the major crime unit, so we called out all homicide, verified subjects, body discoveries, high-profile investigations in the municipality and the like. And like I said, that was a great opportunity to prepare me for chief. My law enforcement career started in Powder League, where I grew up. My father was a chief, so you see firsthand what chiefs do. Growing up through it, I was able to, right after college, be hired, and I thought that was an extraordinary opportunity. And then I had the opportunity to Connecticut State Police, so I wound up reaching there. Educated in local schools in Lee. Played a lot of football up here. I don't like that field up there, I'll tell you that.
I'm sure you don't.
It's kind of hard. Got some bumps and bruises up there. It was always a great opportunity. Played a lot of hockey up the road. Again, graduated from Lee High School and attended Western Lee College, where I received a bachelor's degree and sociology, concentration, studying criminal justice. My training includes the Massachusetts Police Academy, the Connecticut State Police Academy, I'm a graduate of the 241st session of the FBI National Academy. 1/10 of 1% of law enforcement in the world are accepted. That was a great opportunity the state police gave me. It gave me an international network of other professionals to constantly communicate, exchange mails of certain and current issues in the country and the world. It's just a great resource to have.
Shawn, I'm gonna stop you there, because we're gonna have some specific questions,
I'm sorry.
probably to draw on a little bit more of what you've been talking about. But I appreciate that overview, and we're gonna start with Joe, but before, we go into the questions, I did fail to mention that this is still a public meeting. I know I told you that over the phone. It is being recorded, and I do have a couple of people who are on the call, so I'll just let you know that Deb Dunlap, who is our admin assistant, Ed St. John, who is our legal counsel, and we have a member of the public, Dan Anderson. If anybody else should enter into the room, I will let you know, as I like to let everybody else here know. If I'm looking at my screen, it's not because I'm being rude, but I'm just trying to manage those who are coming into the room. And if I look at my phone, it might be because there's a sound issue. So I just wanted to make sure I was very clear on the logistics that's happening over here. It's not how I would like to do an interview, but these are the times that we're in. Okay. Joe, if you would like to ask your first question.
Okay, first of all, thank you for, thinking about the town of Adams, considering it for, becoming our interim police chief. And, I want to welcome you here, and once again, thank you for, putting your name into the hat, and I have to say your resume is quite impressive.
Thank you.
My question to you is, and I'm going to read it twice so that you will be able to digest it, and give yourself a little time for thought. In light of the ongoing protests taking place throughout our nation and abroad regarding the death of George Floyd by overzealous law enforcement personnel, do you see policing tactics and racial stereotyping continuing? Will the powers that be relent, or will the same situation rise again? I ask this because there have been other racially charged and egregious actions undertaken by police resulting in the unwarranted deaths of Black Americans. Still nothing has transpired to curb these happenings. Please expound on your views and discuss how racial profiling can finally be put to rest. I strongly believe that all lives matter, regardless of the color of one's skin or any other attributes which one possesses. The world is big enough to accommodate everyone if the blinders are allowed to be removed. So, I'm going to read it this time very quickly. In light of the ongoing protests taking place throughout our nation and abroad regarding the death of George Floyd by overzealous law enforcement personnel, do you see policing tactics and racial stereotyping continuing? Will the powers that be relent, or will the same situation arise again? I ask this because there have been other racially charged and egregious actions undertaken by police officers resulting in the unwarranted death of Black Americans. Still nothing has transpired to curb these happenings. Please expound on your views and discuss how racial profiling can finally be put to rest. I strongly believe that all lives matter, regardless of the color of one's skin or any other attributes which one possesses. The world is big enough to accommodate everyone if the blinders are allowed to be removed.
Respectful place. I have to say one thing. I have, as a professional, reserved to make comment on such events. But this event is in a whole different world of its own. We witnessed a murder on YouTube. That was a murder in progress that we all had to watch. So I feel very comfortable speaking what my experience has been. Working in the Connecticut State Police Internal Affairs Division, overseeing internal affairs operations of the Milford Police Department, I am one for accountability. Now, there are several important factors to understand, and I think considering this is real policy. Let's just say we have policy that's real, usable, and offers guidance. I took the opportunity to read the Minneapolis Police Department's use of force policy. If you look at the actions that resulted in Mr. Floyd's death by the officer, it's completely in disregard for, I would say, a very thorough use of force policy. How do we, as law enforcement, control someone's, I'm going to say, recognition and conduct consistent with valuable policy? Well, we have to go through it many ways. Real sanction for violating policy. Real consequence for violating policy. Now, what's going to happen, and that is a multiple level of policy violation. And what's more upsetting to me is I look at that and I'm heartbroken because I see Mr. Floyd. I see what's happening to him. I've investigated a lot of murder. I've never witnessed one, other than some archived murders, I.e. being John Kennedy and Lee Harvey Oswald and the Vietnamese soldier, the Vietnamese prisoner. I never witnessed one that was in my lifetime. So in my 56 years of seeing that, it was a complete setback. And living and experiencing the challenges and dynamics of law enforcement, I just haven't been able to grasp that. So I study it and I think about it and wonder, well, realities are, there's absolutely no regard for that man's dignity. There's no regard for that man's life. This narcissistic attitude and his demonstration of behavior, kneeling on that man's neck and looking around the crowd, what's he looking for? Approval? Or look what that's absolutely, it's nauseating. And I've had long and involved meetings with the Deputy Chiefs Association on what's next. It is time for change. There has to be change. And it's sad that it's very sad that we're at the point that it takes something like this to do it. Now, this has been growing in the country. I realize it's starting with Rodney King. There's been investigations in the city of Bridgeport that I've conducted and been involved in. There's been investigations in the city of Meredith with the abuse of prisoners or racial profiling concerns. But the state of Connecticut, in my experience, has taken some great strides in trying to address it. In New Milford, we had to log all interactions with persons on an official basis. Sex, age, race, reason, like a motor vehicle stop, was the vehicle searched, not searched, occupants in the vehicle, and we would collectively analyze those statistics to see that we were essentially meeting our policies concerning bias-based policing. We had to log in reports what efforts were made to meet procedural justice. Is everybody being treated fairly? Is this a fair and equitable, transparent interaction? What options and offers? What level of communication did you introduce? So those were steps I took, and I think those were remarkable steps that have been mirrored by many of the departments, and now it's becoming some official processes just to keep the transparency and the fair and equitable treatment above board or available. But again, the demonstrations, the message is clear. It's time for change. How do we go about change? Well, most recently, we have the 8 can't wait. And if we're not familiar with it, it really is a fine-tuning of the use of force policy. And it really turns into something like the documentation of the use of force, which is done by statute. Warning before shooting, exhausting all alternatives before reaching your lethal deadly force level, no strangleholds or chokeholds. If you escape me right now. But all these are addressing various aspects of use of force policy throughout the state and throughout the country. And a lot of policy today is completely under the, I'm going to say, the model policies prepared by the Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, CLIA. And that's the national accreditation standard for across the state. Now, the state of Massachusetts has its level of accreditation, Connecticut, and other New England states. So it's imperative that these standards are prepared in policy and met through training. We can't structure training. We have to structure training to meet policy. We can't not train to policy. We can't miss that. We're responsible. We have to make sure people are trained to meet policy.
Yes, Shawn, We have a lot of other
I'm sorry.
questions. No,
I'm
that's
sorry.
quite
Yeah,
okay.
it's
I've
serious.
got the gist, and I know that, you know, we've got a number of questions,
Right.
and,
It's
I
a
don't
huge
wanna
topic.
I don't wanna short you for, answering, because we have another candidate coming in. So,
I'm sorry.
thank you. No, that's quite okay.
Well, I'm gonna actually, my question is gonna let you expand on what you were just saying. My question is, identify and discuss your experience in creating, reviewing, assessing law enforcement policy and procedure, agency directives, or general orders.
Since in the last, 12 months, I've been, reemployed by the Connecticut State Police as a temporary worker retiree. I'm working directly for the colonel, assessing current policy, procedure, making recommendations for, policy revision, because the State Police of Connecticut is currently under, renewal of its, CLIA accreditation. So I'm assigned to the accreditation unit. I'm working with a retired major, and what we do is, make sure facilities, troops, support services, and, policies are up to standard to meet the CLIA requirements. Myself personally, I drafted and, revised several policies in the town of New Milford, through my, service there, bringing us to the current standards. We, introduced the accreditation process. It's a 3-tier process. We finished tier 1 approvals. We got tier 2 completed. We didn't get our final sign-off. It's in process now. And that would give us state accreditation, and the process almost mirrors CLIA, which would just be another visit from the professional agency, checked off the box when we meet. Policy is, extraordinarily essential. Beyond that, policy has to be, incorporated guide. You just can't have the rules, do this, don't do this, don't. You have to have some direction in there on how to achieve the objective of the policy. Often absolute policy results in absolute failure. It's a guide. Bible, it's a guide, it has to be understood as that. But additionally, training has to incorporate the various, I'm gonna say, avenues that you can go down in your efforts to meet those policy goals. So training is not only specific to exactly the mission of the policy, but some of the variables that can be, developed or developed while you're, addressing or trying to comply with policy. Law enforcement is very fluid. It changes every minute, every second, every time, and we have to train our officers to adapt, improvise, and be available for change immediately. So my experiences, both professionally, during my active career, and most recently, exclusively related to policy development, policy implementation, and giving officers real, and I'm going to say, valuable guidance within the language of those policies.
Chair, a quick follow-up to that. In our community, with the town of Adams, the select board has responsibility for policy. I'm not sure what the process was in New Milford, but how do you feel about working with the board of selectmen on the review of the current policy of the police department and providing updates to the board?
Well, I think that's absolutely necessary. I never heard people complain there's too much communication. And this board has a thumb on the pulse of this community. We can draft policy that's consistent language, from my experiences, that may not be as effective with the language meeting the same objective that can be provided through the experiences of this collective board. So I think regular meetings are necessary, regular discussion, regular action, regular planned action, and a huge part of, I would say, the overall strategic planning of how the department's going to be today and where it's going to be tomorrow.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could just insert, just as a follow-up on the same point, Chief, your experience is in Connecticut, so just on the policy aspect, if you were selected, can you just tell the board how do you go about familiarizing yourself with Massachusetts, relevant law, Code of Mass Regs, and any of the Massachusetts body that regulates police service?
Kind of already started a little bit. I've got a huge network of municipal chiefs. I've been lifelong friends with Steve O'Brien in Lennox, lifelong friends with, Gerald Finley in Stockbridge. I've been, associated with Bill Walsh and Rick Harrington, my whole life. So those are immediate. The Massachusetts Association has an extraordinary information base, extraordinary legal base, and available to, and they really offer new chiefs a lot, coming on board, and some specific, I'm gonna say, direction related to just that.
How much experience have you had working with collective bargaining units, and what do you consider the essential elements of effective labor management relations?
I've had, my initial exposure, I've been a member of the collective bargaining unit throughout my career, except for the last 8, obviously. I have to say, formally it started in 1991, when I was on the state police, collective bargaining committee for a contract. Kind of the guy sitting in the corner catching on what's going on, kind of learning curve. Participated in that, process for about 2 years. Since then, being a sergeant and then a troop commander and in charge, a lot of concerns related to some of the managerial decisions were brought to my attention. In one troop, I had 11 different collective bargaining units between janitorial, clerical, dispatch, civilian employees, records. It was very involved. I frequently met with the collective bargaining representatives. Their input was very important. Sharing information about how the department was handling business, how I was handling business. Really, it was a cooperative and I'm going to say, productive working relationship. Since I arrived in New Milford, like I said, I negotiated 3 collective bargaining agreements with the patrol division, 3 collective bargaining agreements with the dispatch, 2 separate unions, same attorneys, but 2 separate unions. But it was a rewarding experience. I had to make sure the employees got the best they could get, but I had to protect the interests of the town. You couldn't bankrupt the town. And I presented myself like that. Realistic wage increases, realistic raise increases, things like that. Realistic demands. We weren't going to increase vacation to 5 weeks when you come in the door. We weren't going to give you 4.5. We knew at some point in time the standard and the operational averages, accepted averages of the collective bargaining throughout the state was somewhere between 2 and 2.25. So if we could get them somewhere realistic and have a final cost projection at the end of the execution or the ratification of the contract that was acceptable to the town was pretty free with me in how to get there. But I really had to cut off at a number. I always came in below that number, and we always seemed to, qualify some codified practices, some MOUs, some past practices that just seem to keep floating through the contract, and clarify and qualify all of those into the secure template of the contract. So there were no arguments or, I would say, disagreements with language, but it took several years to work through that. There was often, there were grievances that were addressed, most of the time just through formal mediation. The union had its good and bad on the, say, executive board, and I'm not saying good and bad for anything, but some were very limited on, we're just doing it this way, that's it. We have to look at options, because the town is not able to afford that. So, working with that, I understand there's a lot of personalities, there's a lot of passion, because it affects their livelihood, every decision, every word in that contract. So, yeah, that's my experience. Drafting, modifying, working through collective bargaining, several different unions and both between state and municipalities. And that's it. Sorry.
Thank you.
John?
You talked about this in your opening statement in regards to diversity of your department. What training and experience do you have in developing and implementing services and programs, courses, and/or learning objectives that incorporate diversity?
I've attended some management seminars offered by the Connecticut Chiefs of Police Association. We brought in national instructors, we do a 3-day, managerial executive training. And through that, some national, I'm gonna say recruiting professionals and some of the strategies and the valuable results of the, recruiting, and introducing the diversity into the ranks. Specialized training, again, working with our human resources officer and personnel, who was a little bit more involved in the recruitment and training based on his previous state service with Department of Corrections. We capitalized on some, I would say, what we thought to be important. We interacted with the state, town council, see what they thought were important qualities. And we reached out to, I reached out to, some of, the church groups and some of the community activists to see what they thought would be important. And what do you want to see in our municipal police department? What do you want to see in the police department? And how do you want to see us do it? Well, we'd like to see this, we'd like to see, we'd like to see, again, the diversity that matches the demographics of the community. And part of it too was, introducing the officers or the potential candidates to some of the community, representatives. Thought that was very important. So they could get their, kind of say, put their thumbprint on what they're essentially looking at for an employee. Thank you.
Did you have anything raised for follow-up?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry, Joe. So I have a budgeting question for you. So, Jay, I'm gonna ask you to fill in some numbers for me, because this budget is
About 1.8 million.
1.8 million
Personnel operating, and that doesn't include any capital expenditures.
of the total
$16 million.
$16 million of the town's budget. Can you keep that in
I
mind?
want to say, police and DPW are awfully close, but police is probably the most well-funded department.
I had it at 1.7, so I
Why not?
was a little bit, I was close. So if you could just identify and discuss your budgeting experience, knowledge, and skill set.
My budgeting experience started as a resident trooper in Hartford, budgeting salary, recurring and reoccurring expenses, capital plan, both 1, 5, and 10 year. Funding to support the facility, and other, I would say, officer benefits such as EAP and the like. But again, it was modest, it was very small, and that was a complete oversight of the first election. As with the state police, I was involved in high-level command meetings where we discussed some of the long-range, multi-million-dollar, line items, anything relative to, specialized enforcement, contracts, everything. But you weren't hands-on as a sole, I would say, author of that financial plan. But it gave me a good background. When I got to New Milford, I was presented with, being able to research previous budgets, looking at salary, looking at wage, looking at, projected costs, some of the programs, and, we wanted to introduce some of the equipment we needed to support those programs, budget their financial forecast. And then at that point in time, met with department heads and the agency, administrative services, the detective division, patrol services, what do you need to operate, how you want to do it. And they would bring in some, I would say, wish lists. At that point in time, it was time to get responsible and say, what do we need, what do we want, and what's reality. So I would examine for payroll, for example, personnel costs. I knew how many people at a certain, I'm going to say, stage of the contract, the wage, and what that cost would be. I knew there was 35 officers at step 2. I knew there was 27 officers at step 3, 9 officers at step 5. So I knew those costs and project those into an accurate pay scale and have those personnel costs almost to the dime. What was fluid, obviously, was overtime costs, sick leave, all the overtime costs, the major storm event or something. So those were almost fluid, but working through, I would say, past experience and past history, we were able to bring those pretty close. At that point in time, we looked at opportunities to supplement funding through grants, supplement different programs, equipment, and potential services like additional traffic enforcement through a forecast of available grants. You kind of look at the grant schedule and see what you've applied for in the past and what you usually got again next year. So that was kind of a very valuable tool. I had a good report with the finance director. I incorporated the mayor in some of my strategic planning and financial planning. Again, but the very valuable resource was the financial director, especially early on. Yes, you do this, so you can do that. From that, we led to, looking at potential for additional personnel, looking at retirements, where we might be, and then you have to capitalize on academy training costs, you have to look at reoccurring, mandated, state annual training costs. So all those were calculated and presented in the budget. With that, capital expenditures for everything from, furniture replacement. We did set up early on centralizing information technology. So I didn't have a police lieutenant programming and fixing and straightening out computers. We had a computer professional do it. I didn't have, sworn law enforcement transporting, mail to the town hall. So we took a lot of those, and those were different line items we had to add for additional personnel, but we kept sworn personnel when we swore in the police business. So with that, not only was it drafting the budget, it was making it more efficient. So my experience was, preparing a budget draft, meeting with, the finance board, purchasing committees, going over capital expenditure, interest, going over occurring and recurring expenses in the budget process and plan budget. And then at that point in time, presenting my budget publicly at a hearing. I did that through Windows and PowerPoint, and and looking at the Adams budget, I wish I could present it like that. We had a line item for 1 penny, it was crazy, but it was very involved. So it was, involved. My budget's met with little or no, concern. Often complimented as being open, often commented as being thorough and informative, on presentation. And they were approved with, pretty much minimal cuts, if any, that would not affect our operations. So, my budget experience.
Thank you. And I will say, you might not have a line item for a pencil, but you will be questioned on every line item by the Board of Selectmen and our Finance Committee. So I can assure you that it is a tough process.
I found the route to the question was just a full justification, and we're satisfied with most of the interest.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So,
Okay,
second question.
as a lifelong resident of Adams, I have witnessed the evolution of our police department. I vividly remember as a young man, the officers walking the streets and addressing you as you pass by. The nightly rounds to stores to check for their security, the writing of tickets for expired parking meters. In short, the Adams police had a visible presence and you knew who they were. Times have changed, they always do. No longer do the town's police officers walk the beat. They drive their cruisers to accomplish their tasks. No longer do they check stores after closing. Instead, they shine a spotlight on the business facade and move on. No longer do they write parking tickets for meter violations. We needed to add a town physician to make this transaction. I must admit that I cannot put a name to a face of all of our police officers. What is your take on policing, which I term resident-friendly?
That's the way I grew up. You know, who was walking on the street and they knew me by name. Yeah. I'm sure my father has an effect on that. I try to get that back in the middle. Simple as wave to people. You drive down the street, say hello. It was remarkable how many officers responded is, do you know this guy? Well, I met him, yes. Oh, he said, hey, hi. Oh, it's pretty good. I would, as a chief, maybe it's micromanagement, I try to stay away from that. But I would ensure that my supervisors would make regular checks on midnight shift of the back stores and get every check. And not just tire tracks around the building, I want to see footprints on the door. I want people to grab doors. I thought it was very important. Our industrial base was huge, but we had enough people to minimally accommodate a portion or a large portion of that on minimum one day a week, 2 days a week. In Adams, I see the culture, I see the demographics, I see the structure of this community very similar to what I grew up in. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask officers to make a physical check. I think the business owners deserve it. I think it's necessary to have an officer on the street. I think it's necessary to see the officers. I think it's necessary for the town Board of Selectmen and, the government to know who's working for them. This driving around with the windows up and your sunglasses on your forehead and just getting to and from where you gotta go has to expand in regular interaction, conversation with residents. Stop, talk to the kids, go to the playground, go to the ball game. When I started my career in New Milford, I was appalled that I didn't see a cop grabbing a coffee. Like, why don't you grab a coffee, say, at the store owner? Oh, we got enough. I want you in the store. I want you to have coffee. I want you to have communication. You'll learn so much. You'll learn who people are. And if I be just a store owner, it's gonna be the guy getting the coffee. It's gonna say, hi, I'm Joe Smith. I'm Jim Brown, whatever. That's all part of community policing. That's what community policing, 21st century policing is. It's what cops used to do. We don't do that anymore. We've got to get back to it. We're not trained to do it. The trainers that are training young officers don't have experience in that. So, you know, it takes an old guy like me to say, look, this is the right way to do it. And then what you're doing is not wrong, you can just do it better. So I'm an advocate to have officers on the street. And walking down the street, seeing an expired meter, you can write a citation, you can write a warning, or raise the awareness that there's a violation. And you're getting paid anyway. So I'm an advocate to be involved, be active, be engaged, grab doors, talk to people, say hello, and just be around. It's not, you don't have to get, I don't know, it's concerning. I don't have an excellent answer, but I do have an answer that takes supervisory oversight and a change in culture. And it's something that might be a little resistant at first, but once they find out the reward, and I used to tell my guys, my women in the agency, when you interact with somebody, make sure you're done. And when you finish, is there anything else I can do for you? That one statement went miles with the community. There's a lot of feedback.
Yeah, so, thank you.
Okay, the Adams Police Department works closely with the Adams Fire Department, Adams Forest Force, EMS, Regional Emergency Management, and State Police, as well as community-based organizations. What has made you an effective collaborator in your current or past jobs?
Working in one of the most remote areas of the state of Connecticut, some of my patrol areas, your closest help was one of the firemen driving by. So I always had a great rapport with the fire department. I had great appreciation for it. My grandfather, my uncles were long-time volunteers for the fire department. You know, the siren going off and the pickup trucks heading out the yard, well, we're in the same neighborhood. So I understand the commitment of both the volunteer fire departments and the professionals, but there's an awful lot to say and you know, respectful for the commitment. So I've always had the fondest respect for those that volunteer to serve and those that serve and put themselves at risk. But that being said, it's a very productive relationship because it's a huge component of the tax base. It's a huge voting influence. And if we can support the fire department as best we can, we'll get their support. It's simple things like a motor vehicle accident. You might have the road shut down. You don't have the officer available to stand there and direct traffic for 2-3 hours for whatever reason. But the volunteer and the commitment of the fire department will often jump in and help out with traffic control. So I've always had a lot of exposure to the area fire departments. I work closely with community emergency management directors, county management directors. I exercise a lot of the resources with the state police when I was with New Milford. I knew what they had, I knew some of the things, and those are huge cost offsets. When the town being committed to these, I'm going to say, high risk, low frequency, I'm going to say, use of resources that normally without the state police we would have to have. So it's important to have a positive, productive relationship with the state police. Barracks is right up the street. I could have no reservation meeting regularly with the troop commander. I'm not sure who's out there now, but I know some of the troopers that do work in the area. I talked to 2 of them. They said they got a great rapport with the guys for the PD, women at the PD. So yes, it's very important we have very effective, and there should be regular communication. on what their needs might be from the police department. Certainly I would express what my needs are for, you know, assist the police department. So I always have regular meetings with the fire departments in Milford. They were volunteers for a city, town that size, but a great group of guys. I always got invited to they got the best steak dinner, I'll tell you that. But, I always got invited to their dinners, their meetings, wherever we go, we share training opportunities, we incorporate the fire department in a lot of our training, and they would incorporate a lot of the police. So, very effective to have a positive, supporting relationship between the two, and the other, you know, professionals as well.
Thank you. Anderson?
Thinking about the regional and collaborative nature of the police chief position, what is your experience working with the district attorney's office?
Pittsfield, I'm familiar with the recent, assignment of, District Attorney Harrington. I know, some of the investigators assigned to her office, from Mass State Police, working with them in the northwest corner of Connecticut. I have to say, in Connecticut, I have been highly involved with the state's attorney's office. Most recently, I've worked with, obviously, as chief in Milford, but I've done some high-profile investigations under the direction of the state's attorney's office, specifically with County, Dave Sheepak, Dawn Gallo, Dave Shannon, in fact, from my phone. Beyond that, in the state of Connecticut, in order to execute a search warrant requires review of a state's attorney and signature of a neutral court magistrate. And some of the actions and investigations we're conducting would require spontaneous execution of search warrant. So more than once I've been to the state's attorney's house at 3, 4 in the morning. You need to look at this, Dave. We're going to look at hitting the store later this morning, and I got Judge Matt Savage on standby. So I'm in the kitchen, put coffee on, cooking breakfast in the kitchen. So I've always had a great rapport with the state's attorney, only because I had a very aggressive and ethical work ethic, I would say, like work style. I don't think, I think the conversation for a secondary round of references, he said make sure they call me. But that being said, I understand that they are the chief law enforcement agent in the county. We are required to cooperate with their office in every way. I think regular meetings, available interaction, to meet the requests and requirements of her office are necessary and will be done.
Thank you.
John?
This question involves a few different, about 3 different breakdowns of questions. The position of police chief requires a high degree of accountability. What does accountability mean to you in a legal sense with regard to data and metrics in terms of relations with the community? And I just want to state with regards to data and metrics that that's something that has been lacking to this board for information to determine how are things going, how are we doing, what are the metrics of the department. It's not to use negatively against the department, it's just that the board needs to develop a budget or to the community, their support to pass budgets to support our police department. So without any information coming this way, it's very difficult for us to help. So that's one of my personal main areas is metrics and measures, things like that.
Well, I've got to kind of wrap myself around it because it's a 180 of who I am. But I've got to, I know where you're coming from. I know chiefs that have embattled themselves with not sharing information with the councils that oversee really what's going on. Accountability. I've learned over the years that law enforcement and being higher up in law enforcement, you're into a smaller fishbowl every time you move up, and everybody knows what you're doing. I visit a restaurant with my wife. Oh, the chief was here last night for dinner. The mayor would call. You went to dinner last night? Like, well, yeah, I went to, Giuseppe's or whatever. And she's like, well, you didn't call me. Well, jokingly. But, so I know how attentive people are to what's going on. Now, I may not even realize who they are, but they'll know who I am. So accountability is a 25/8 situation. It's going to be 25 hours a day, 8 days a week. They're going to know who I am, what I'm doing. And they will know how I'm doing it, because it might not be from their personal observation, but somebody within the agency is gonna make that disclosure, because they have an open and honest relationship with that individual. I have nothing to worry about. I've got this alter voice syndrome. I always think the Lord's watching. I always think that I'm gonna do something wrong. So I always, you know, I always see, what am I doing? What awareness will this create? Who's gonna read about it tomorrow in the paper? And what's gonna be said after review by someone who doesn't know the facts? So I'm always cautious of that, and I learned that more than ever. But it's necessary to develop proper reporting procedures. I mandated a daily printout of case log, what the calls for service were, who they involved, what they involved. And I prepared that for public news release. So even if the reporters came, they want to know what the police department's doing, there you go. Obviously, proper redaction, pursuant to statute, medical issues, et cetera, age, things like that. But the reality is that if I'm doing it for reporters, that surely should demonstrate that I'm doing it for the council. And I try to meet with the town council on a regular basis for the town meetings to tell them exactly what's happening with the police department. Not rumor, not innuendo, but factually, here's where we are. And I thought it necessary, especially during the height of some of the commitment of our officers into the theater of war over Iran and Iraq, that, hey, I got a letter from, Jimmy Jones, and he says hi, and I would leave it for them. I would send emails regularly to members of the town council that, this happened the other night. So I made regular notification, and I've shared information openly. Again, it's public record, but it's your public, and there's no reason why. And the more you know, the less you'll have a question of what I'm doing. And if you don't like it, I'm sure I'll be right on your doorstep to say, what are you doing while this is happening? So it'll relieve you of having questions, it will relieve the board of wondering what's going on, and I think it'll give you an accurate focus of where we're going, and you'll see, pursuant to future requests, of why that request is there. Thanks.
So Shawn, we have a little bit of time, so, I just want, my follow-up question will be to just ask my final question will be to ask if there's anything that we didn't ask that you wanted to share with us, this evening, if you wanted to take a couple of minutes. There's something in your experience that you really think that you can bring to the table and we just didn't ask you about, if you wanted to.
If you allow me to come back in about 40 minutes, that's what I think about it, remember, I will. I am prepared, to, move forward in this position. Like I said, I have a vast amount of experience. I pretty much conducted myself with utmost professional and personal integrity throughout my career. I've treated everybody I've encountered with dignity and respect. I share a high level of respect and return from many of the people. I run into people often that I put in jail. And how you doing? She's good. You kind of off, set off a little bit, but I've never had, the negative, reaction from people because I treated people with respect. And I think that's important. And I want to make sure the officers under my command do that. Again, very simple. These aren't your enemies. These are people that made mistakes. These are people who we are now not warriors against. We're now guardians of. So you move forward with, we're more a caregiver atmosphere in law enforcement than we are private people of rights and liberties and things like that. So training must incorporate that. It's all under sensitivity training and crisis intervention training. It's all out there for us. We have to pursue. Essentially, my resume says it all. I'm looking forward to returning to the area. I still have property to leave. My wife and I we've talked about this at length. This opportunity will certainly give our working test period of me, so to speak, if it avails. But I'm familiar with the community. I'm familiar with the lifestyle. I really enjoy the lifestyle in this area, Berkshire County, et cetera. And I think the more I was away, the more I learned to really realize it's a very unique area. I worked in all 169 towns in the state of Connecticut. I didn't see what I saw and grew up with in this area. I just didn't see it, I didn't live it, and so I want to come back to it. And I want to come back doing what I like to do. So I want to just...
Yeah, Roger.
One thing that we haven't touched on, Town Minister touched on the legal, but are you certified to be an officer, police officer in Massville?
I presented a copy of my advisory letter from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Municipal Police Officer. I know Mary Beth has since retired. I did call prior to that application. I'm still certified as a police officer in Connecticut. It's called a comparative qualification. It will incorporate probably 30 to 64 hours of online review, and then an application from the town manager for certification, and that's it.
Okay. I only ask because, I don't know if you kept up on the news, one of, another community and county hired a chief, he worked for quite a while, and then they found out he wasn't qualified to work in Mass as a, police chief, police officer, or anything.
I've had those investigations in Connecticut. It's a delicate process. I'm very familiar with the certification, pursuant to the Police Officer Standards and Training Council in Connecticut. Like I said, I did have interaction, with Mary Beth Donahue out of Randolph, Mass. And the follow-up phone call prior to the submission of the application here, that's why I learned she had retired. But I think what's going to require is another, just maybe a current advisory. I couldn't get that answer, but it's nothing more than a request, obviously, we're familiar with. And again, I know it's an early start date. If this was something where you were to, I was given afforded the opportunity, I would have no reservations to secure all that interest prior to final commitment. And always in a position they don't want to.
I think that language would probably be worked into the contract per labor council. The timeframe to achieve certification consistent with MPTC requirements.
So Shawn, do you have any questions of us?
I know it's gonna be a whirlwind process. I know you're on the fast track, or essentially in the left lane. Like I said, I do plan to officially return to the area, not with these temporary arrangements I have. Again, being potentially yes or no in almost 6 months, that's just the open and forefront. I will be, my wife and I have already looked at some real estate opportunities, so it's in the process, but we're not committed to buy a house tomorrow. But again, I'm very prepared to be at home, so.
Did you play in the 1979 music game for the Calgary Championship? You might have been a little bit young then.
So, Lee?
Yeah, not when you came out.
Yeah, Frank, not Frank, Great Bay County Sheriff, Lou Caroni.
Oh, Corona,
Yeah, he changed your helmets from the orange to white, we're all angry about that. Yeah, that was a tough game.
Yeah, that was tough. You guys were good.
Well, I got to beat up.
Were you on that team?
For the Music Valley team, yeah.
Oh, you were? No kidding.
There you are.
Yeah, we had a incredible couple of running backs.
Yeah, you guys.
In fact, our quarterback, Dave Eisenberg, freshman. But out there, my freshman year.
We just brought down some big farm boys.
Well, they probably split wood all morning before the game, I don't know. It's just amazing how the whole county's changed, you know, mills closing, yeah. They're covering into the federal community and the cultural arts. Well, I see our visitation and stuff, so, again, great transition.
Anything else for us?
I just appreciate the opportunity. I sat on board with the Connecticut Chiefs Association, selecting chiefs. I know the level of involvement, the stay awake night hours, thinking of what questions to ask and what right answers, and, I've had some experience. I think your questions will really, dial in the right guy, the right candidate for you, so. I think it's an extraordinary, very, I'd say, interesting and rewarding process.
Good. And, as I mentioned, we are moving quickly through this process. Our, chief is scheduled to retire mid-July. He has indicated that he could make himself available after that date if need be, if the process goes a little bit longer. But we expect that we would be in touch with you at some point next week to let you know where we are in the process. We do have 3 evenings of interviews, and, which I think I told that to you on the phone. But if anything should come up, and you have another question about the process, I believe you have my contact information, you have the town administrator's contact information.
I see some of the names that popped up, and I've worked with them all except for the candidate from Indiana, so,
Okay,
or Omaha, so,
yeah,
great guys.
good.
And the other thing too to keep in mind, Chief, is that, applying for the interim position, either being awarded the position or not awarded, that does not have any impact on your choice to apply for the permanent position. That'll also be posted again. And we're kind of keeping our fingers crossed for a late summer restart on that.
One of the things I know the position officer benefit package,
Mhm.
just as a personal note, I'm not requiring that. I can carry my benefits from my retirement, which I choose to do so because it's very, it's a great package, and my wife would probably say worse. So,
Understood. We wouldn't want that to happen.
I know there's a savings to the town on that, but that's just personal stuff.
Thank you.
All right.
Before COVID, I would have been shaking your hand and thanking you in that way for being here, but I do thank you on behalf of all of us.
I certainly do. Appreciate you getting your time, I know the commitment, and if we don't meet again, it was a very nice meeting everyone, and, we'll see you again.
All right. Thank you. And, if we could just take a 5-minute recess before the next candidate comes in?